Today, we're heading to China. As you might know, China is famous for its historical dramas. But tonight, we're diving into something much darker. If one night, at exactly 1:13 a.m., you hear a knock on your door, 3 knocks, steady, no one outside, would you dare to open it? Welcome to Urban Legends, where stories don't need blood or gore. Sometimes, forgotten truths alone are enough to haunt you for a lifetime. Tonight, I'm going to tell you an ancient legend from China about the mysterious practice of corpse walking, where the dead were carried through forests, back to their hometowns, and the one time they brought back someone who was still alive. If you enjoy chilling tales with psychological depth, don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss what's coming next. Like this video if it gave you goosebumps, and comment below if you've ever heard strange knocks in the middle of the night. Corpse walkers' shadows over the Wuling Mountains. Hunan Province, China, 1987. By the late 1980s, the mist-covered mountains of western Hunan still held tight to their ancient beliefs and mysterious customs. One of the strangest among them was the practice of corpse walking, a secretive tradition in which the dead were brought home for burial, seemingly walking on their own through treacherous mountain paths. In Yangshun County, near the border of the Mao people's lands, lived a man named Li Qing. He was one of the last remaining corpse walkers, a profession many saw as superstition. But to Li, it was a sacred duty. He believed his work helped restless souls return home and finally find peace. Li Qing lived alone in a small wooden cabin deep in the forest. By day, he farmed the land and tended to a garden of medicinal herbs. By night, he would sit beside his fire, listening to the wind whistle through the cracks in the walls and to the strange sounds that came from deep within the woods. The villagers respected him, but always kept their distance. They believed he could communicate with the other side. One night in July 1987, a family from a nearby village came to Li Qing in desperation. Their only son, Zhang Wei, a young construction worker, had died in an accident in another province. They couldn't afford to transport his body back home by vehicle, so they turned to Li Qing, hoping he could bring their son back in the traditional way. Li agreed. He prepared everything he needed: 2 long bamboo poles, some rope, and a small brass bell. He also packed a red cloth to cover the corpse's face, a symbolic veil meant to block the spirit from seeing the road back, so it wouldn't return to the world of the living. The following night, Li set off with 2 assistants. Zhang Wei's body was secured between the 2 bamboo poles, forming an H-shaped frame. When the assistants hoisted the poles onto their shoulders, the corpse appeared to bounce with each step, the flexible bamboo giving it a haunting, lifelike movement. From a distance, it looked like a man walking on his own in the dead of night. They moved through narrow trails, across forests, and over deep streams. At every crossroads, Li rang his bell and whispered chants in the local dialect to ward off evil and guide the dead spirit home. But after several days, strange things began to happen. One of the assistants, a man named Awakens, began acting off. He muttered nonsense in his sleep, tossed and turned violently, and sometimes screamed into the darkness. He claimed that Zhang Wei had been standing beside his bed, staring at him with empty, lifeless eyes. Li was concerned, but kept going. He believed that as long as they completed the journey, everything would be fine. But one stormy night, Awakens disappeared. They found him at dawn, lying unconscious by a stream, still whispering Zhang Wei's name under his breath. After that, the second assistant, Bing, began to panic. He wanted to abandon the trip, but Li Qing refused. He was certain that stopping halfway would doom Zhang Wei's spirit to wander and possibly bring harm to the living. On the final night of their journey, just as they neared Zhang Wei's hometown, the unthinkable happened. The corpse slipped off the frame and collapsed onto the road. Li stepped forward to check, and then the corpse's eyes opened. Staring straight at him, The Final Night and the Nameless Shadows. July 23rd, 1987, 3 a.m. near Yunshui village. Li Qing stood frozen, his heart nearly stopping in his chest. The body of Zhang Wei, dead for over a week, was staring back at him, eyes wide open. There was no sound, just those eyes, cloudy, yes, but aware, as if the soul inside had never truly left the body. Behind him, Bing shrieked in panic. "Master Li, it's looking at me." Li Qing bent down and gently closed the corpse's eyes. His hand was trembling, but he forced himself to speak calmly. "It's just muscle contraction. Sometimes bodies twitch in their final stages. Don't look too long." But they both knew this wasn't natural. Those eyes saw. They followed. And there was one chilling detail Li Qing couldn't ignore. Zhang Wei's eyelids had been sewn shut before the burial. After that night, Bing spoke no more. For the rest of the journey, he walked silently, head down, eyes blank. Whenever Li Qing glanced back, he'd catch Bing staring at the corpse, unblinking, hollow. The forest wind howled like distant cries of grief, and the trees leaned in as if warning them of something that had no name. By noon on July 24th, they finally arrived at Yunshui village, Zhang Wei's final resting place. Family, neighbors, and relatives waited quietly. No one said a word. Zhang Wei's mother dropped to her knees, crying without sound. His father, Zhang Hao, gave Li Qing a solemn nod. No words, just sorrow. The funeral was held quickly, but as the coffin was lowered into the ground, Bing suddenly screamed, "No, that's not him. That's not Zhang Wei." The crowd froze. Li Qing rushed over to restrain him, but Bing fought back like a man possessed. "I saw him last night. He crawled out of the hammock. He looked at me and said, 'Don't bury me.'" No one dared respond. The funeral ended in chaos. Zhang Wei's family dismissed Bing's outburst as psychological trauma from the grueling journey. But that was only the beginning. The strange happenings in Yunshui village. 3 days after the burial, Zhang Wei's little sister, 9-year-old Zhang Na, began sleepwalking. Every night at midnight, she wandered out of bed and toward the cemetery, mumbling. Brother Wei came back. He came back but didn't knock. In the house, things began to shift. Leftover bowls of rice were found empty. A pair of sandals near the front door looked as if someone had just stepped out of them. The mother said she heard 3 knocks at exactly 1:13 a.m. every night. But when she opened the door, no one was there. Only wet footprints on dry ground. Then on July 29th, Bing vanished. His small home at the edge of the village was found abandoned. Carved into the wooden wall near the window, with a knife, were the words, "He never made it back. He's still following me." Li Qing returned to the village to investigate. But something felt wrong, as if Zhang Wei's soul had never truly left this world. Or worse, had never been properly guided to where it was supposed to go. Ancient records and a forgotten warning. That evening, Li Qing made his way deep into the forest, back to the abandoned cabin of Bulak, a Mao shaman who had once taught him the sacred art of corpse walking. Time had all but swallowed the place. The wooden beams were rotting, the roof half collapsed, and tree roots now wrapped around the structure like a dying embrace. But inside, beneath layers of dust and decay, Li found what he was looking for. Old scrolls, written on brittle goatskin parchment, their words faded and torn. The writings were in a strange mix of classical Chinese and the Mao dialect, filled with cryptic symbols and forgotten wisdom. Then he found a passage that made his blood run cold. Not all corpses can be led. Some die unjustly. Some die with rage. Their souls never leave the body. We do not lead them because they will lead us. There will be signs, eyes that do not stay shut, the scent of earth that does not belong, and forest birds that no longer fly overhead. Li's mind flashed back to that night. Zhang Wei's corpse, eyes wide open. The silence of the forest, not a single bird call. And that terrible scent rising from the ground, like damp earth sealed in a crypt. The pact had been broken. The empty grave. July 30th, heavy rain fell from a darkened sky. Li Qing returned alone to the cemetery in Yanshui village. Under the cover of night and storm, he dug up Zhang Wei's grave in silence. But when he opened the coffin, it was empty. No body, only the red burial cloth that had once covered the face, now twisted into a tight knot. And beneath it, pressed into the damp soil, a trail of muddy footprints, leading away from the grave, toward the forest. Footprints in the rain, and the memory no one wants to remember. July 31st, 1987, Yanshui village, 5 a.m. Li Qing stood in the graveyard, rain dripping from his hair down to his shoulders. Before him, the empty grave gaped like a wound in the earth. There was no thunder, only the quiet drip of water from the tattered thatched roof above the tombstone. In his hand, he clutched the red burial cloth. The silk threads had frayed, not from time, but from being gripped tightly by someone or something. For days, the footprints in the mud remained untouched by the rain, crisp, clear, leading into the woods, each step evenly spaced, calm, not hurried. But what made Li Qing's blood run cold was that there were two sets of footprints, one large, one smaller, as if someone was guiding someone else. Back at home, Li Qing was unraveling. He tore through old journals, cryptic notes from Master Bulak, even unsent letters, pages filled with strange details from 2 decades of corpse walking. Then, from a 1979 entry, he found something that stopped him cold. A woman's body was taken from Dongjiang to Shulia. On the way, all 3 assistants had the same nightmare, a walking corpse dragging them into the dark. After the funeral, all 3 vanished. I believe something refused to leave this world. For the first time, I questioned the very ritual I was taught. What if we weren't closing the gate? What if we were opening it? The truth from the silent elder. Determined to uncover the truth, Li Qing sought out Madame Zhao, the oldest woman in the village. She had survived the famine of 1961 and had seen death and rituals long buried by fear. She lived in a small shack at the edge of the village, a place locals avoided, believing it to be unclean. At first, she refused to speak, but when Li Qing placed the red burial cloth in her hand, something shifted in her eyes. "You brought back one, without a soul," she whispered. Li froze. He pressed her for answers. She slowly nodded and stared at a faded photograph on the wall. It was a photo of Zhang Wei. But there was one subtle difference. A scar ran from his right ear down to his collar, a scar the body never had. Then she told him the truth. Zhang Wei had a twin brother, named Zhang Wen, who vanished mysteriously in 1975. The 2 had gone into the forest, and only one returned. Since then, the family never mentioned Zhang Wen again, as if he had never existed. And Li Qing understood. The body he brought back may not have been Zhang Wei. That night, Li Qing heard a soft jingling bell, the very bell he used in corpse rituals. But it was locked away in his wooden chest. He opened it. The bell was still there, untouched. Then he looked toward the window and swore he saw a pair of pale, clouded eyes staring in, unmoving, from behind the curtain of rain. He rushed outside. No one was there, but in the mud beneath the window, 2 sets of footprints, one large, one small, leading toward the western mountain, a place no one had dared enter since the disappearance in 1975. The burnt letter and the missing name. The next morning, while sorting through old books, Li Qing discovered a letter tucked behind an ancestral statue, never sent, its edges scorched. "Mother, Father, if I don't return, Don't come looking for me. My brother and I saw something in the Western Mountain Cave. Something that is not human. And now, it wants to become a part of us. If you ever see me again, don't open the door." There was no name. But the handwriting was not Zhang Wei's. Li Qing realized the writer might have been Zhang Wen. Someone had tried to destroy the letter, but failed. And now, Li faced a question that made his blood freeze. Who really died that day? And who, or what, returned in his place? The pieces were falling into place. But the worst part was still hiding out there, in the forest, waiting. And if Li Qing wanted answers, he'd have to return to the one place he swore he never would. The breathless cave and the voice in the dark. August 2nd, 1987, Western Mountain, outskirts of Yanshui village. A light rain still fell. Mist blanketed the landscape like a curtain, separating the living from things better left unknown. Li Qing wore an old cloak, a fabric satchel slung across his back, carrying incense, talismans, and a copper bell on a rope. It was all he had left to call spirits back or banish them away. He was entering the forbidden forest, where an old cave known as the Sighing Hollow lay hidden. Its name sounded gentle, but the villagers told a different story. When the wind howled, the cave's echoes were in size. They were screams. No one had dared approach it since 1975, the year Zhang Wen vanished. The deeper he walked, the more unnatural the silence became. Not a single bird sang. Each footstep sank into something soft and damp, like mud or flesh. Around 10 a.m., Li Qing reached the cave entrance. The trees around it were twisted, leaning away as if in fear. Moss clung to the stone like a second skin, and the air was ice cold, as if the earth itself was breathing. On a stone just outside the mouth of the cave, he saw a faint carving. "I'm still alive." The words sent a chill down his spine. Someone had survived here. Maybe Zhang Wen. But the message felt less like a cry for help, and more like a warning. Alive, but no longer fully human. Li Qing stepped inside. The copper bell in his hand gave off a soft chime, but it didn't echo. The sound simply vanished, absorbed into the stone, as if the cave itself refused to let it spread. Deeper inside, he found what looked like a makeshift shelter. Ashes, a half-burned log, and an old school uniform shirt, white with blue stripes, exactly like the ones Zhang Wei and Zhang Wen wore in their youth. Then he saw a cracked mirror, left leaning against the wall. Its glass was split, but still reflected. And for a moment, just a moment, Li saw a shadow standing behind him. He turned. No one. But the bell in his hand began ringing by itself. Long, mournful tones. Then a whisper came, not from any mouth, but from inside his mind. "You brought the wrong one, Li Qing." He stumbled back. The air grew thick, like something was crawling through the cave. Not by footsteps, but by thought. From the darkness, a figure began to take shape. A young boy, dirt-covered, eyes hollow, wearing a school uniform. "You're the corpse walker, aren't you?" The voice echoed strangely, as if coming from two places at once. "Are you, Zhang Wen?" Li asked. The child said nothing. He only raised a finger, pointing toward the cave's mouth. There, another figure approached, slowly, taller, broader. It was Zhang Wei, but something was wrong. They both had the same scar, the same expression, the same hollow stare, and both stared at Li, as if silently asking, "Which of us is real?" Li stepped back. From his pouch, he pulled a Mao talisman, written in chicken blood and ash from his first corpse walking ritual in 1965. He knew this was the only way to close the gate. If this soul has not found peace, then I, Li Qing, sever the path. I return you to the realm of darkness. He lit the talisman and cast it into the old fire pit. The copper bell shattered, with no one touching it, and a scream erupted. Not one, but two, twisted together, agonized, furious. When Li Qing awoke, he was lying just outside the cave. The sky had turned dark. Everything was gone. No Zhang Wei, no Zhang Wen, no mirror, no fire. Only one new carving now marked the stone. We're back. The living vanish and the curse of two names. August 5th, 1987, Yanshui Village. 3 days after Li Qing returned from the stone cave, Yanshui Village was no longer a quiet place. It began with the sudden disappearance of Zhang Na, Zhang Wei's younger sister. She vanished without a sound in the middle of the night. No broken locks, no signs of forced entry, only a small muddy slipper, left at the threshold, its soil identical to the kind found around the cave in the western mountain. Then, 2 more villagers disappeared, an elderly literature teacher and a retired carpenter who lived near the cemetery. The county police reported them as missing without evidence, but the villagers didn't need a report. They had already smelled it. That strange, damp scent of earth carried in the wind. Rumors spread like wildfire. They said that if you stood by the village well at midnight, you might see a figure in a school uniform, head bowed, motionless. Some swore they saw twin boys walking hand in hand along the riverbank, but when they ran toward them, no one was there. An old woman who sold porridge at night whispered, "I heard 2 children laughing, but the sound wasn't human." It echoed up from under the ground. Panic gripped the village. Families with children pasted talismans on their doors. They scattered sticky rice across thresholds. Incense burned through the night. And Zhang Wei's house, boarded up tight. But every single night, just like before, the knocking returned. At 1:13 a.m. exactly, the face in the mirror and hands in the wall. Since returning from the cave, Li Qing felt eyes on him, everywhere. In his mirror, he would sometimes glimpse a figure behind him, a soaking wet teenager, with hollow black eyes and pale lips. On the night of August 7th, while sleeping, Li felt someone take his hand. He bolted upright, only to find, on the wall above his bed, a muddy handprint, still wet, small, like a child's. The next night, there were 2 handprints, the morgue and the mistake. Determined to uncover the truth, Li Qing went to the county morgue, the same place where Zhang Wei's body had been held before the ritual. After a tense conversation with the record keeper, he was allowed to see the logs. The name was clear: Zhang Wei, died from a construction accident, July 14th, 1987. But when Li Qing looked at the X-ray report, his stomach turned. There was no scar on the face, the same scar Zhang Wei supposedly got in 5th grade. There was another oddity. The report noted no medical history, no vaccination records, no school files. Then came the final, horrifying detail. Another entry. Same date, unnamed male, similar age, no family to claim him, labeled for autopsy, but the body mysteriously vanished from cold storage. Li Qing's breath caught. The boy he was given to guide home might not have been Zhang Wei. It might have been Zhang Wen. Then came the most terrifying realization. During the ritual, he hadn't just brought back one soul. He had awakened the one left behind. The forgotten brother. The nameless one. Buried. Unclaimed. Denied even a grave. And when the chance to return came, he took it. He stole a body to live again. But then, where was Zhang Wei? The real one? That question was answered on the night of August 8th, on the wall of Li Qing's home, written in burned charcoal. A new message had appeared. I was buried alive, and now I remember home. The buried alive and the night with no return. Night of August 8th, 1987, Li Qing's wooden house. The words were still etched on the wall. I was buried alive. And now I remember home. They gleamed like dried blood. The acrid scent of burnt charcoal lingered in the air, yet no fire had touched the room. Li Qing knew. This wasn't a threat. It was an accusation. Hands trembling, he poured a cup of wine before the ancestral altar. In all his years as a corpse walker, he had never made a mistake. Until now. And that mistake was calling him back. At exactly 1:13 a.m., the knocking returned. Not gentle, not frantic, just steady, like the heartbeat of a man buried alive, pounding against his coffin lid. "Who's there?" he asked. No answer, only a voice from inside the house. "You know who I am now, don't you?" Li Qing spun around. No one. But the incense bowl on the altar, smoked in reverse, the ash curling downward. The return to the grave. At sunrise, he packed his things. But this time, not to guide a soul, but to face one. He returned to Zhang Wei's grave, where all of this should have ended. The grave was torn open, the earth uprooted, the coffin split wide, empty. Inside, there was only a damp slip of paper, shaky handwriting, barely legible. I woke up with dirt still falling into my mouth. I screamed. I begged. No one came. "Thank you for never checking." Li Qing collapsed. The image came back, clear and cruel. That night, he had seen the body's eyes open, and he had closed them again, thinking it was just a death spasm. But the truth was worse. Zhang Wei never died. He was either unconscious or mistaken for dead. And Li Qing, in his ritual trance, had completed the rite, guiding a living boy's body to the grave. And in doing so, he made room for the forgotten soul to return. Zhang Wen, the twin without a name, without a grave, without a prayer, came back, and Zhang Wei was buried alive, his cries smothered by dirt, until only rage remained. Now Li Qing stood between two empty graves, two brothers, both abandoned, by their family, by the village, and by him, the one meant to guide. He whispered, "If I was wrong, then take me instead." A voice replied, calm and cold, "No, now you must guide, one last time." The final walk. That night, no one knew where Li Qing went, but some say they saw him. The old man, shoulders bent, carrying two bamboo poles across his back, and between them, a white-draped figure. He walked the road through the village one last time. No one stopped him. No one dared. A young girl later said, "I saw Grandpa Li carrying two people. One had eyes. One had no mouth." The village froze at her words. The one with eyes was Zhang Wen. The one with no mouth was Zhang Wei. And the one who carried them was the man paying the price. Morning of August 9th, the path beyond the village. At sunrise, villagers found something on the forest path. Li Qing's copper guiding bell, split in two. His body was never found. Only footprints remained. 3 sets, one large, 2 small, leading into the woods, and none of them ever came back. The empty house and the bell in the wind. August 15th, 1987, Yanshui village. Li Qing was never seen again. His old wooden house was sealed with red string, tied in the ancient Mao tradition, a warning reserved for places where the air was no longer clean. No one dared open the door. Yet every night, villagers swore they heard footsteps inside, pacing slowly, back and forth. Sometimes, there were 3 soft knocks against the wooden wall, evenly spaced, like the heartbeat of someone long buried. Every year, during the ghost month of the lunar calendar, a faint light flickers inside the house. Some say they've seen an old man, hunched and slow, walking into the home with two children in school uniforms. But no one ever sees them come out. The letter without a name. In 1990, 3 years later, during a mountain road expansion project, a survey team passed by Li Qing's abandoned house. Hidden in the wall, they found a letter. No date, no addressee, just trembling handwriting. If you're reading this, remember, not every soul should be brought back. Some spirits are lost not because they can't find the way, but because we forgot them. And when we remember, we've already invited them home. I was wrong. I opened the path. I was no longer a corpse walker. I became the one who led a mistake home. There was no signature, but the handwriting was unmistakably Li Qing's. Shortly after, local authorities banned the practice of corpse walking entirely. From then on, all deceased had to be transported by proper means, with official documents. Anyone who brought up Li Qing was warned to stop fueling superstition. But in whispers, under clay-tiled roofs, the villagers still spoke of it. The one buried alive, the one brought back, and the one who opened the door. They said, one boy was buried alive because of a simple mistake. Another was called back after being forgotten for too long. And the one who led them both unlocked something that should have stayed shut. At the old school where Zhang Wei once studied, children say that if you stay in the hallway alone after class, you'll hear a faint bell ringing in the distance, and then a whisper, right behind your ear. I was led home. What about you? At the Yunshui village cemetery, where their graves no longer remain, the groundskeeper still insists. 2 small patches of dirt are always free of weeds, and incense burns on its own, every 1st and 15th of the lunar month. No one knows who does it. But the strangest thing, on rainy nights, some have heard the laughter of 2 children, and the voice of an old man, gently telling a story. And when the wind howls hardest, the villagers swear they hear. No one's lost anymore, right? Kids, even now, no one dares enter that house. Over 30 years have passed. The red string remains, tied tight. Whenever someone tries to remove it, by the next morning, it's back, re-knotted. And so, the people of Yunshui keep one unspoken rule. Never knock on a door 3 times at night, because if someone answers, it might not be someone living. Li Qing vanished, along with 2 bodies, one that had once lived, and one that had been forgotten. Since then, no one has dared knock on that wooden house at night. What do you think? Did Li Qing find redemption? Or was he just the next to be led away? Let me know in the comments. I want to hear your thoughts on this ending. And if you've stayed with me this far, perhaps you're ready for the next legend. We'll meet again, on another night, with another story. Darker, quieter, hungrier,